Imagine discovering that you've been chosen to save an entire nation, but that revealing your identity could cost you your life. This is the reality Esther faced over 2,500 years ago. Esther, the decision that saved a nation and nearly cost her life. A biblical story that will leave you breathless. A Jewish orphan becomes queen of the greatest empire of the age, but when her people are about to be exterminated, she must make the most dangerous decision of her life. The book of Esther hides a fascinating secret. God is never directly mentioned, but you'll see how he orchestrates every detail of this suspenseful plot. Palace betrayal, death decrees, desperate fasts, and a phrase that changed history: "If I perish, I perish." But there's something about Esther that most people don't realize. Something I'll only reveal at the end of this video that will completely transform your perspective on purpose and courage. The question is, when it's your turn to choose between safety and doing the right thing, what will you decide? There's a book in the Bible that intrigues even the greatest scholars. The book of Esther is the only one in Scripture where God's name doesn't appear even once. Not a single prayer is recorded. No miracles are described. But paradoxically, it's one of the stories where God's hand is most evident. It is the 5th century BC, in the heart of the Persian Empire. King Xerxes, known in Scripture as Ahasuerus, rules 127 provinces stretching from India to Ethiopia. It is the largest empire the world has ever seen. In the shadows of this luxurious palace, where gold glitters and power corrupts, a deadly plot is about to unfold. Jews live scattered throughout this vast territory. Many have not yet returned from the Babylonian exile. They are vulnerable, far from Jerusalem, dependent on the mercy of Gentile kings. They don't know it, but they will soon face the greatest threat to their existence since Egypt. It is in this seemingly tranquil setting that our story of Esther in the Bible begins, the silence before the storm, because sometimes it is precisely when everything seems calm that God is preparing his greatest moves. What you wouldn't expect is that salvation would come through a young orphan girl who hadn't even revealed her identity. Hadassah, that was her real name. A young, orphaned Jewish girl, raised by her cousin Mordecai as if she were his own daughter, but the world would know her by another name, Esther, meaning star, and like a star, she would shine in the darkness when hope seemed lost. Picture this scene. The royal palace of Susa is abuzz with activity. Hundreds of the most beautiful young women in the empire have been gathered for an extraordinary contest to choose a new queen. Queen Vashti had disobeyed the king and was deposed. Now Esther walks the marble corridors, her heart pounding, knowing that each step could change her destiny forever. For 12 months she prepares herself. 6 months with myrrh oil, 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics. But there's something different about her. While other young women demand jewelry and luxurious clothing, Esther accepts only what Haggai, the eunuch in charge, suggests. Her humility shines brighter than any ornament. When she is finally presented to King Ahasuerus, something extraordinary happens. Out of hundreds of candidates, the king falls in love with her, not just for her physical beauty, but for something in her character that touches his heart. Esther and King Ahasuerus connect in a way that transcends marital politics. But here's the secret that would change everything. Following Mordecai's advice, Esther never reveals that she is Jewish. She becomes Queen Esther, the most powerful woman in the empire, but carries within her a hidden identity that will one day determine the fate of her people. How could a simple orphan become the key to the survival of an entire nation? Being queen was no fairy tale. Esther and King Ahasuerus lived under strict Persian laws that not even royalty could break. One of them was particularly terrifying. No one, not even the queen, could approach the king without being summoned. The punishment was death unless the king extended his golden scepter. Esther quickly learns that her new position comes with privileges, but also with mortal dangers. She is a woman of biblical faith, living in a world where faith must be silent, where her true identity must remain hidden. Each day in the palace is an exercise in balancing who she is and who she must appear to be. Mordecai remains her connection to her roots. Every day, he walks near the palace courtyard to check on her. It is through him that Esther keeps her conscience awake to her people and her heritage, but it is also through him that danger will arrive. During this time, something significant happens. Mordecai discovers a plot against the king's life. Two eunuchs plan to assassinate Ahasuerus. He tells Esther, who informs the king, saving the monarch's life. Mordecai's name is recorded in the royal chronicles, but at that time, no reward is given. This seemingly small act will be a crucial piece in the divine puzzle, because God was preparing every detail for the moment when Esther would face the most important decision of her life. But first, a deadly enemy had to emerge. Enter the Persian palace of Haman the Agagite, a man thirsty for power and recognition. He becomes the empire's second in command. The king orders everyone to bow before him whenever he passes. Everyone obeys, except one man. Mordecai refuses to bow. As a faithful Jew, he prostrates himself only before God. This refusal is not political rebellion, but spiritual conviction. Day after day, Esther and Mordecai stand by their principles, even when it means provoking the wrath of the most dangerous man in the kingdom. Esther and Haman have yet to meet directly, but fate is already putting them on a collision course. Haman not only hates Mordecai, but when he discovers he is Jewish, his wrath flares against the entire people. His thirst for revenge turns into planned genocide. Here's where the story takes a sinister turn. Haman goes beyond punishing one man. He decides to eliminate an entire nation. Using his position of influence, he plants a deadly lie in the king's heart. The Jews are a dangerous people who do not follow the kingdom's laws and pose a threat to the empire. And since you're following this incredible story, why not leave a like and subscribe to the channel? You won't want to miss what happens next. Haman's hatred wasn't just personal, it was spiritual. An age-old battle between light and darkness, between God's purposes and the enemy's plans. And Esther, unbeknownst to her, was about to become the centerpiece of this war. How would a queen protected by palace walls discover that her people were condemned to death, the 13th day of the 12th month? This date would be recorded in history as the day chosen for the extermination. Haman offers the king an astronomical sum, 10,000 talents of silver, to finance what he calls a solution to the Jewish problem. Esther and the royal decree are now connected by an invisible thread of destiny. The king, blindly trusting Haman, signs the document without even knowing its details. Royal seals are applied. Couriers are sent to the 127 provinces. The order is clear: exterminate all Jews, men, women, and children, and take their property as plunder. The date was chosen by lot, Pur in Persian. Haman literally rolled dice to determine when an entire people would be massacred. What he didn't know is that there is a God who rules over all fate, who turns chance into purpose. When the decree was read publicly in Susa, the city was in turmoil. Why destroy a people who lived peacefully among themselves? But the decree had already been sealed with the royal ring. In Persian law, it was irreversible. Not even the king himself could revoke it. Meanwhile, in the palace, Esther remains oblivious to the unfolding drama. She doesn't know that Esther and Israel's salvation now depend on her next decisions. She has no idea that within a few months, she and everyone who shares her inheritance will be dead unless something extraordinary happens. But outside the palace's golden walls, despair had already begun. The sound echoing through the streets of Susa was unmistakable. Wailing. Mordecai tears his clothes, covers himself in sackcloth and ashes, and cries out loudly in the middle of the city. In every province of the empire, the same scene is repeated: fasting, weeping, and great lamentation among the Jews. Esther and Mordecai are now separated by more than palace walls. She is unaware of the impending tragedy. He is at the center of national despair. When Esther's servants tell her about Mordecai's condition, she is distressed. She sends him clothes, but he refuses. So she does what any concerned person would do, sends Hathach, one of her eunuchs, to find out what's going on. The conversation that follows changes everything. Mordecai gives Hathach a copy of the death decree and a message that will shake the foundations of Esther's life. "Go speak to the queen," says Mordecai. "She must go to the king and plead for the lives of her people." Esther's response reveals the impossible dilemma she finds herself in. Anyone who approaches the king unbidden will be put to death unless he extends the golden scepter. "And it has been 30 days since I have been summoned to appear before him." But then Mordecai sends back words that will echo for eternity. "Do not think that because you are in the king's palace, you will escape, being the only Jew left alive. If you remain silent now, help and deliverance will come to the Jews from elsewhere, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows if you were not made queen for such a time as this?" Examples of courage in the Bible always involve moments like this, when comfort must be abandoned for what is right. And now Esther faced the most difficult decision of her life. "Go, gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days and 3 nights. I and my servants will also fast. After that I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. If I die, let me die." With these words, Esther transforms what could have been mere human courage into divine dependence. Esther's fast is not just strategic preparation, but a spiritual cry. For 72 hours, an entire community humbles itself before God, seeking his intervention in an impossible moment. Esther's faith and obedience are uniquely manifested. She not only fasts, but also asks all her people to do the same. It is a moment of extraordinary spiritual unity. Jews scattered throughout Susa stop their activities, close their businesses, and put aside their daily concerns to dedicate themselves to prayer and fasting. During these 3 days, Esther faces not only physical hunger, but also the emotional weight of her decision. She knows that by revealing her Jewish identity, she will not only risk her life, but will also lose her position as queen forever. Her comfortable and secure life will end the moment she steps into the royal courtyard uninvited. But something powerful is happening. While Esther fasts in the palace and the Jews fast in the streets, miracles in the book of Esther begin to unfold. God is moving pieces on the board in ways no one can yet see. On the 3rd day, something changes in Esther's heart. Fear gives way to determination. Uncertainty is replaced by clarity of purpose. History was about to witness Esther's decision that would echo through the centuries. "If I perish, I perish." 4 words that sum up one of Esther's purest displays of courage recorded in human history. After 3 days of fasting, she dresses in her royal robes and walks toward the palace's inner courtyard. Every footstep echoes in the marble corridors. Her breathing is controlled, but her heart is racing. Esther's decision isn't just about saving her people, it's about choosing truth over safety, justice over personal comfort. She is literally walking toward death or life, depending on the king's reaction. The guards see her approaching. The royal courtyard falls silent. Everyone knows the law. Approaching the king without invitation is a capital offense. But Esther keeps walking. Her faith is not in Persian law, but in the God who rules over kings and empires. When she finally stands before the throne, King Ahasuerus looks up. For a moment that seems eternal, he simply watches her. Esther remains standing, knowing that in the next few seconds she will discover whether she will live or die. Then something extraordinary happens. The king doesn't just hold out the golden scepter, he even offers her half his kingdom. "What do you want, Queen Esther? What is your request?" Biblical heroines are remembered not only for their courage, but for their wisdom. And Esther was about to demonstrate both, but his answer surprises everyone. "If it pleases the king, let him and Haman come today to the banquet I have prepared for him." Why didn't Esther immediately reveal the reason for her risky visit? Esther's strategy was brilliant. Instead of directly confronting the king about the decree, she invited him and Haman to a banquet. Esther's example of leadership is manifested in the way she sets the stage for her most important revelation. At the first banquet, when the king asks again what her request is, Esther does something unexpected. She invites them to a second banquet the next day. "Tomorrow, I will do as the king has said." Her patience and timing demonstrate wisdom beyond her years. Haman leaves the first banquet feeling honored and important. After all, he was the only official invited to an intimate dinner with the king and queen. But when he passes through the gate and sees Mordecai, who again refuses to bow, his joy turns to fury. That night, Haman is so furious that he can't sleep. He builds a 70-foot-high gallows. He wants Mordecai's execution to be seen by the whole city. He plans to ask the king for permission the next morning to hang his enemy. But there's something Haman doesn't know. That same night, King Ahasuerus also can't sleep. He asks for the royal chronicles to be read and discovers something he'd forgotten, that Mordecai had saved his life by exposing the eunuch's conspiracy, but he was never rewarded. As dawn breaks, how Esther saved her people will begin to unfold in ways no one could have imagined. The second banquet will reveal not only Esther's identity, but also Haman's true face. The table was set for the most dramatic revelation of the Persian Empire. The second banquet begins in a tense atmosphere. The king, after publicly honoring Mordecai that morning, to Haman's utter humiliation, is curious about the true reason for Esther's invitations. "What is your petition, Queen Esther? It will be granted. What is your request? Even if it is half the kingdom, it will be granted." Then Esther finally reveals what she has been keeping in her heart. "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king that I may be granted life, this is my petition, and that my people may be spared. This is my request, for I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. The impact is devastating. The king is shocked. Who is this, and where is he who dared to do such a thing?" Esther's response echoes through the hall. The man, the adversary, and the enemy is this wicked Haman. Esther and Haman finally face each other face to face, but there is no dispute. The truth is like a light that exposes the darkness. Haman is struck dumb with terror by the revelation. The man who planned the genocide of an entire people has discovered that the queen herself belongs to that people. The king rises in fury and leaves for the garden. When he returns, he finds Haman begging for his life, prostrate on the couch where Esther is reclining. This seals his fate. "Does he also want to rape the queen in my presence, in my own house?" the king shouts. The sentence is immediate. Haman is hanged on the same gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Miracles in the book of Esther include these extraordinary turnarounds where divine justice is perfectly manifested. But there was still one problem. The death decree was still in effect. With Haman dead, the king hands over his ring, a symbol of royal authority, to Mordecai. But the original decree cannot be revoked under Persian law. The solution must be creative. A new decree is written, authorizing the Jews to defend themselves and destroy any army that attacks them. Esther and Israel's salvation are realized through this extraordinary reversal. What should have been a day of slaughter becomes a day of victory. How Esther saved her people is a demonstration of how God can use one courageous person to change the destiny of an entire nation. The couriers gallop to all 127 provinces, carrying the new orders. Where there was weeping, now there is joy. Where there was mourning, now there is celebration. Esther saving the Jews is not just a physical rescue, but a restoration of hope and dignity. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the original date chosen for the extermination, the Jews successfully defend themselves. Their enemies, who had previously prepared to attack them, now flee in fear. The turnaround is complete. But the story of Esther establishes something even more enduring. the festival of Purim. This name comes from Pur, the lot Haman cast to choose the date of the massacre. What should have been a symbol of destruction becomes a symbol of celebration. To this day, thousands of years later, Jews celebrate Purim by remembering how God saved them through the courage of one woman. Women who changed biblical history include Esther as one of the most powerful examples of how a willing person can become an instrument of divine providence. But what is the true legacy she left for us today? Esther's story ends, but its echoes resonate through the millennia. Biblical heroines are remembered not only for their deeds, but for what they represent to each generation facing their own Hamans and their own death decrees. God's purpose in Esther's life reveals itself as a pattern he still follows today, choosing unlikely people, placing them in strategic positions, and using their obedience to fulfill his eternal plans. An orphan becomes queen. A queen becomes the savior of her people. Biblical female characters like Esther teach us that courage is not the absence of fear, but action despite fear. She was afraid when she walked to the royal courtyard. She was afraid when she revealed her identity. But she chose to obey God despite her fear. The phrase, "for such a time as this," has become a timeless motto. How many times have you wondered why you are in a certain position, why you have gone through certain experiences, why you have the abilities you do? Esther teaches us that there are no coincidences in God's plans, only preparation for such a time as this. But here's the secret I promised to reveal at the beginning. Esther never mentions God's name, yet her entire story is about him. Likewise, we often don't see God directly acting in our lives, but he is orchestrating every detail, preparing every coincidence, positioning each right person at the right time. Esther's legacy isn't just in history books, it's in the lives of every person who chooses to do the right thing, even when it's risky, who uses their position to defend the defenseless, who trusts that God has greater purposes even when we can't see them clearly. Faith and obedience in Esther continue to inspire millions of people around the world to discover their own for such a time as this. The story of Esther leaves us with a powerful question. What about you? What time like this is God preparing you for? What position has he placed in your hands? What people has he placed in your sphere of influence? Maybe you're a student who can defend bullied classmates. Maybe you're a professional who can make ethical decisions even when they cost you a promotion. Maybe you're a parent who can teach courage and integrity to the next generation. Esther teaches us that heroes aren't born. They are forged in moments of decision. When you say, "If I perish, and choose to do what's right, regardless of the consequences, you'll be following in the footsteps of this extraordinary woman of faith in the Bible. The God who used an orphan girl to save an entire nation is still at work today. He still places the right people in the right places, still transforms fear into courage, still uses what seems small to accomplish the impossible. If this biblical story of Esther touched your heart, please like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss more stories that will transform your perspective on faith and purpose. Share this video with someone who needs to discover they've been called for such a time as this. In the comments, tell me, when was the moment in your life when you had to choose between safety and doing the right thing? What decree are you facing that seems impossible to change? Remember, the same God of Esther is with you today. Your story is still being written, and who knows, maybe it's for a time like this that you've come this far.